Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, comedy on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And, you feel like sometimes you're flying blind and you can't necessarily see the path that you're on. And then all of a sudden the fog clears and you wind up and you look out and you're on this precipice and you're really high up the mountain, much farther than you thought you were, and you look down and it's a little bit petrifying because you've ascended so much, and you recognize that when you connect with certain spirits, the goal is not to look down but to keep going up. And I get a chance to do another installment with a guy who has been at the bottom of the pit and recognizes that realism is activated at that point and there's nowhere to go but up. And he certainly took the baton and a higher state of consciousness and took that into a prolific career as a musician. Amazing session guitar player and live performer. Hadley Hockensmith, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Well, thank you, Jake. I don't know if I can live up to those words, but
it's okay. It's all a fantasy in my mind to a degree. Hadley, do you remember when or what, maybe the better question is, can you talk about when the efficiency model came into the recording studios? Do you remember that in the late 70s there was like an adherence to how to which drums to hit? Or I know a lot of drummers talking about, basically coming in and the producer said, just play straight beats. Don't play yourself. Just play what the last hit tune was. Once you started to get this efficiency model in with the addition of mechanized rhythm, it started to constrict music in my mind. You can hear it on records, not everyone, but that efficiency. Do you remember? I mean, because I know that you were there before that, and I just wonder if you remember what your feeling was when that started to come into play in, like, I don't know, the late 70s.
Yeah. One of the things I remember when that started happening was I quit doing so many live sessions with a bunch of other live players in the room, but started doing more overdubs. In other words, each musician was kind of separated, and it didn't feel the same at all. There wasn't the chemistries where you could play off of each other, and it sounded more isolated, and I think I just enjoyed it so much more when I could play with a full rhythm section. It was just more inspiring to me.
Like when, as a naive, about to turn 43-year-old, I mean, was that simply because the bean counters started to get involved with the actual musical application and the process of making music, so therefore they just didn't understand? Because for a long time, like, I just remember in the late 60s, people like John Densmore, the Doors were on Elektra. Jack Holtzman was like, it was a kind of a boutique label, but, the bean counters were kind of like, hey, I don't know what this music is, but it's selling records, and that's all we care about is making money, so let's just leave the music to the people that know it best. And Is it as simple as saying it was a cost-cutting measure, or do you think that people's responsibilities, people started to do things that they were not staying in their lanes professionally, so to speak?
Yeah, I think it was cost-cutting, but I think it was also kind of a retreat from a lot of the producers from taking a chance.
Right.
Up until that time, producers would believe in an artist or a song or whatever, and they would say, "Let's go for it, full time. Let's let it be totally unique and be the artist." And of course, that's what happened with the Beatles, and we saw what happened with them. But now, or lately, in the last 20 years, you come into a recording session, and maybe I'm playing a guitar overdub, and someone says, yeah, we want kind of a Larry Carlton vibe on this.
Right. Instead, yeah,
Already
exactly.
have been put in a straitjacket.
Yeah, I mean, where's like you were hired to be like why can't you just be Hadley? Why can't you serve the song? Why can't you just serve what the song is asking for? Why do you have to comp somebody else's chops? That is weird, man.
It's weird, but it happens a lot. And this is certainly,
But
excuse
let
me,
me let me ask you something. You said it because I totally am with you. In modern era, it happens a lot. Can you talk about when it didn't happen, especially when you guys came out to LA and those kind of mid '70s sessions? Like, what was that feeling like of complete and the ability for you to already understand the spirituality of music and then being able to serve the song without somebody saying, "Hey, man, can you just play like Tedesco or Barney Kessel or whatever?" Like it was like just whatever you feel, that's what you should play.
well, I hate to go spiritual on you,
That's
but
okay.
as a Christian, I believe God made each of us totally unique. And the thing he wants from us is not patterned after anyone else. It's to do what we can do best and what he has gifted us to do best. And anytime you go into a recording studio and you're given too much instruction, it's almost like that switch gets turned off. And then kind of an autopilot pop record switch gets turned on. And they're not the same thing at all.
You nailed it because I've had friends who've they're not world renowned producers, but they noticed that when they were producing and or leading records, that when they started to direct people in how to play, they lost that person's soul. That person checked out, just like you were saying. Like with Andre, or when you got out to LA, were there like some of those mid '70s sessions, late '70s? I mean, can you talk about some of the unsung producers or engineers that really allowed Hadley Hockensmith to connect with his own unique spirit and sound?
Well, my lifetime friend Bill Maxwell was a perfect example of that. And we were doing a lot of sessions with a Jewish Christian artist named Keith Green, who I just thought was maybe the best songwriter I ever worked with. Just a beautiful artist and singer and keyboard player. And the one thing about Keith, he was a very good piano player. So when it came time for me to play a guitar part, he wanted it to be basically a duplication of the piano part.
Right.
And because that's all he'd been hearing, because he was mainly doing concerts by himself. But the problem is those parts didn't work on the guitar. They didn't feel right, and they didn't connect with the guitar. So Bill was kind of like the go-between to say, Keith, your piano parts are great, but we've already got them. So let's let Hadley do something different, almost like a counterpoint thing. And Keith finally saw the light on that. He was obstinate at the first few times, but he got the feeling, and we made some great records.
What was it? I see his records. What was it about his lyrics that really inspired you and made it so authentic?
Well, the lyrics were Christian, no doubt. But the thing that was beautiful was both the writing and the lyrics had passion, true passion. It's not something you can work up. It's not like a Pentecostal preacher, you're getting everyone excited and the organ starts going crazy and everyone gets emotional. This was like the real thing. And some of the songs were very powerful, but some were very sweet and soft, almost like talking directly to God. And I knew Keith personally. I actually stayed at his place a number of nights, Debbie and I, and we got to see how he lived. And he lived it. He was the real deal. And he was a huge influence on Debbie and I.
I'm looking for this quote. I mean, can you talk about? I can't find it right now. When I interviewed Michael Omardian,
Oh,
he,
wow.
I got to send you that interview because, like, on Mirror, like the albums that he did, um, on like in 74, 75, like, um, he
White Horse, was that one of those?
White Horse, Adam Again, and again,
Right.
these were. I was asking him because he talked about the way him and Stormy would write lyrics and almost continue within the text and the stories to continue to create images of mystery or mysticism within within the songs. And he goes, today's modern Christian music is worship music. You're praising someone, whereas before there was always a bit of mystery, and that's what made those early. And I would assume sunlight is something similar to that. Can you talk about, in your mind, how the I don't hear a lot of mysticism in gospel music, if that's the right word to use, or Christian music today. I hear a lot of understanding of who God is,
Right.
what He's about. It's sort of man's view of God. That's not what I heard. Keith Green, I think, was not like that, and Omar wasn't like that. Can you talk about how the messages of Christian music have changed?
Well, I personally feel like mysticism is a part of Christianity in that, although we believe the Bible is the Word of God for us, the things we need to know right now, it's certainly not an explanation of everything. It's not even an explanation of the universe, really. In other words, God has a lot of things going on that maybe He has chosen not to tell us about, or even thinks we're not ready to hear about yet. So in that way, there's room for this mysticism. But I think what's happening today, there's been so much out-and-out false doctrine, false teaching, TV preachers, this kind of stuff, that people are leery of getting fooled or getting off on the wrong track. So maybe they've overcorrected a little to the other side just to make sure everything's according to Scripture, according to what we believe God has told us for the here and now.
How do you? I mean, I just like Hadley. I mean, you're just a human cat like everybody else. But I mean, how do you, in your own way, not that you're somebody who's dogmatic or wants everybody to feel the same way you do about God, but I mean, what for people that have overcorrected and now are just really hugging the guardrails and losing objectivity and curiosity and mysticism as it relates to what is actually out there in the universe, can you talk specifically about maybe a time about how you ultimately open people's minds back up because they are afraid because they've either been duped before or something like that? I mean, in your own way, because I just feel like that's a major crisis because, I mean, having a religious compass and a spiritual guide is absolutely essential, to keep for a lot of people. But when you begin to hug the guardrail so closely that there is no mysticism or magic or possibility out there, then your view of the world starts to narrow, and then fear and, quite honestly, hate comes into play. And I just wonder how you work with other cats, being.
Yeah, well, hopefully not hate.
Yeah, no, I mean, just, not saying, like, the idea that, you still go around and you hear, again, I don't dwell in these churches, but, people will say, listen, serve God and get close to Christians, but if they're not Christians, let them fall away or something like that. Like, there's still, like, a lot of, sort of,
Well,
anyway.
that's certainly not the case at my church, but I'll tell you something I've observed.
Yeah.
And it kind of ties into being a musician or trying to be really good at anything you're trying to learn, the more people grow, I think the more expansive they think. In other words, I think maturity brings freedom. In fact, Christ talked about freedom. He said, "He who I have set free is free indeed." Well, that freedom is part of what we're supposed to be living in. And it's hard to strike the balance. I think everyone has to do it uniquely for themselves. But the Bible says that the Holy Spirit is there to help us to strike that balance. But no, I don't like this idea of gosh, what's the word? There's a word that they use. Deb, do you know the word?
I'm sorry, no, I wasn't.
She's like, you assume she's glued to the interview, you know?
In other words, you're going by the law.
Right.
Strictly by the law.
The letter of the law, the letter of the law. Like you're going right by the strict, the interpretation of the way. Yeah. And that, yeah, exactly.
Jesus said, "I show you a better way," and it's based in love. He says, if you're acting in love and living your life in love, you fulfill these commandments automatically.
Can you give an example in your life of when you didn't go by the letter of the law, but stayed within the construct of your relationship to God?
Well, some people might say that me taking the job to tour with Neil Diamond, which I did for 34 years, playing those big arena concerts, they would say, well, I'm not so sure that's of God. You're going to be around worldly people. You'll be around loose women. I mean, all this stuff.
Sure.
And that was all true. But the thing is, I felt the freedom to do that because I knew it was a unique opportunity, and I also knew that Neil's show is not X-rated.
That's right.
So
That's right. And it was on you to keep yourself sovereign, or don't get involved with those extemporaneous kinds of pleasures, so to speak. It's on you.
I mean, two things would come up against you. I think most guys touring. One would be the sexual aspect.
Right.
And thank God he kept me totally free from that. I don't claim I did it totally in my own strength, but with God's help, I did.
Absolutely, man.
And the other thing is pride. Very easy to get puffed up in pride, especially if you're standing in front of, say, 30,000 people and they're all screaming. Of course, they're screaming for Neil, but a lot of these people seem to appreciate the band also. And so if I started feeling a little bit of that, and I'm talking about while on stage, while performing, I would just make it a point right then to just talk to God. And I would say, Lord, I'm so thankful that you've got me up here in front of all these people. You know how much I love to play guitar and play great music. And here I am doing what I always dreamed of. And I'm just so thankful for that. And I almost can't believe it's happening, but it is. And I felt the joy of the Lord just kind of enter my heart when I would do that. And I did it numerous times.
I want to read you this from I would assume a dear friend of yours, and I'm just I love the cat so much. It was an interview I did with Ron Tutt, who I believe you probably were on Neil Diamond's tours with. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, 34 years. In fact, Ron Tutt is the one who's responsible for me getting the gig.
Yeah, I think he might have told me that. I'm going to send you that interview. But he said, I was asking him, maybe before I read his quote, I'll just ask you. I said, because, this is a guy, like, I don't need to tell you. He played Lalo Schifrin. He was on tour with Jerry Garcia and Elvis. Obviously, the Neil Diamond stuff, it's interesting because we live in this
All the great records he played on in L.A. as
Oh my
well.
God, Cat's dude. Dude, I don't want to shortchange the guy. A Hall of Fame Cat.
Oh, definitely.
No doubt. But I said, how do you? Again, you're meeting, like you said, you're meeting the worldly people. You're staying in great hotels. You got great sound systems. You're getting paid well. And yet, my hang up, and I asked Tut this, being that he's been in so many different settings as you have, how? Not professionally. It's not about professionalism. How do you get inspired to play when it's basically it's kind of the same set every night? I mean, you're there as entertainers because you're there to play the hits that people came to see you.
Yeah,
they pay.
right.
And so how, as a musician, when it becomes so predictable, I just come from that jazz influence where you play the head of the tune, you leave the head of the tune, and, maybe everybody comes back in on the downbeat, but, ultimately you're breaking up time and form and having a ball. And I realize that most lay people, including myself, they pay good money to go see Neil Diamond and they want to see the hits. But as a musician who has that, I was asking him, how do you stay, and I'm asking you, when you're going on a run and there's so much security and so much stability, as long as you can stay away from the the women and the drugs or whatever else and the tantalizing stuff, how do you stay inspired knowing that every show is basically I don't want to say cookie cutter, but it's basically the same. You're not really stretching out. How do you, as a musician, stay inspired?
Well, first of all, I got to hand it to Neil. Even though we had a similar set list night to night, he always liked to change up a few things, even if it was just song connections, order of the songs. And plus he would ad-lib. Not everything was an ad-lib, but a lot of it was. And he was a very funny guy, good comedian. And but the other thing, I think being a session player, that's kind of my background, as well as Ron Tut's, you realize that you make the recording sound like the first time.
Right.
Ideally, that's what it's got to sound like every time. And I say got to. I didn't feel like I had to. I wanted to. Very different. In other words, I still felt like, well, you know what? I still haven't played Sweet Caroline as well as I can play it. That's probably a not so good example because the guitar parts are pretty simple. But there were other songs that had intricate guitar parts. And I always felt like I can do this better. And so I really would struggle every night to do it just a little better. Or maybe come up with a different part. I didn't always have to play what was on the record, so I was free to experiment to a certain degree.
Have you always been, even though, just in general, like in talking to guys like Terry Haggerty from the Sons of Champlin or, Hadley or, Steve Cropper, in some settings it's all, it's like, do you believe that, or was there a time when you, have you ever played the same solo the same way once? Is it always different? And because it's just, that's who you are. Some people just memorize, like you said, what the solo off the album, and they just play that the exact same way. It's very rote. And then some people are so excited and the vibe is so high, or like you said, they're saying, I want to play the song like it's the first time in the studio, that ultimately whatever comes through you is different every time. You're one of those cats that never plays the same solo the same way once. Yes. I love it.
Even if you played the same notes, you might emote it differently.
Right. Can you, I want you to talk to younger cats about if that's unconscious, is that something that you can work on by breaking bad habits? How do you go about that? Because I see, again, it goes to this idea of playing it safe, don't taking chances. They're afraid they're going to clam a note, when in fact the clams are sometimes the magic of a record. So I mean,
Of course.
what's some of those? What's a way to develop good habits as it relates to playing every solo differently every time?
I think being in touch with your heart, because your heart is in a little different place each night, and each time you play a song. So that would be where you start. Other than that, I would say just breaking up patterns.
Right.
In other words, you can still, if someone says, this is one of Neil's songs, say the Songs of Life, a ballad, but we don't have Neil today, so we just want you to play it on guitar. And you play the melody, and it would sound different than Neil, but people would get the idea,
Right. Right.
Great melody of the song, which is one of my favorite songs he ever wrote. And kind of forgot where I was going.
No, breaking up patterns. Breaking up patterns.
Yes. The idea is I wouldn't be trying to play it exactly how Neil sang it, but I would be trying to keep it melodic and keep it sensitive to the actual spirit of the song. And, great songs to me, they have what I call a marriage between the lyrics and the music.
Mm-hmm.
The two reinforce each other. And if you have a song that doesn't have that, it's almost like the two are fighting each other. And that's one reason I haven't been real big about playing heavy metal praise music or something like that, just as a weird example.
No, explain. I mean, you're telling me that popular type of heavy metal has crept into gospel or Christian music?
Not so much heavy metal. I think the idea is a lot of the songs that speak to me about the Lord or about his love, his forgiveness, salvation, these are all very positive things. And they're sweet things. And it's just hard to get a very loud, blasting guitar.
You're right, 100%.
Be louder than the vocals. It almost sounds aggressive and maybe slightly hostile. It seems to go against what you're singing about.
Talking to Hadley Hockensmith here, part two. Just such a humbled opportunity to be able to speak to him. We got the game Name That Voice. I'm going to put this in for you.
Okay.
Take a listen to it, and we'll come back.
Okay.
Spiritual thing is basically when you're playing, and it's just not bebop. This is other music too, but bebop in jazz is probably that's the high end of what we do as jazz musicians. But just the spirituality comes from it's like something. Now this may sound abstract, but it's something that Wayne Shorter said to me one time. He said that the only way you can really, really, really play is that you have to go to the store and buy some milk for your grandmother. When he said that to me and the drummer Omar Hakim. Now he had a few drinks, a few old drinks.
Right.
I said, "Wow!" But a couple days later, it hit me, because it's like to come if you have one of those kind of families. You go to see your grandmother. She says, "Go to the store and get me some milk," and you go there. There's a love. There's a love for something other than just what you're looking at. It's like your own personal love, which could come from God, which could come from the force of life. It could be whatever it is that you think makes you tick. Mm-hmm. That if you tap into that, whatever that is, it's not a material. It's not the instrument. It's not the notes. It's the life force. And that is very, when you operate on that band, that's or on that frequency in life, that is very spiritual.
Hadley, I know we're getting real deep again, but do you want to take a guess at who that? You want to take a guess at who that is?
Well, at first it was something about the voice. I thought, could that be Jay Graydon? But I know.
Yeah,
I know it's not Jay.
No, I haven't gotten to him yet. That was my first interview with from 2014 with Stanley Clark. And,
Oh, wow.
and here he is. We were talking about, because a lot of people, Stanley came up before Return to Forever playing upright bass, and he was playing with Horace Silver, and he was playing with Joe Henderson. And, maybe not so much Horace, but like Joe, like those guys would let the accompanists like go free. I mean, they couldn't play like out and ruin the song, but I mean, they would allow those cats to have unbridled freedom in their instruments. Yeah. And as a result, a lot of the music that was pressed on records has this, well, you just feel that everybody's operating on it's not on this ground frequency. It's like a higher level. And I was trying to get him to articulate it. And he came up with this story that Wayne Shorter told him over drinks one night, where if you really want to play spiritual music, whatever genre, it's like going to the store to get your grandmother some milk. And I wanted you to, in your own words or your own life point of, do you know what that means? What does that mean to you? Because to me, it means it means a overarching devotional, creative opportunity where you are at a certain point, at a certain frequency of total openness, and if anything, you're trying to get everybody else up to that level through your playing. It's beyond whatever concept of love we know of on this planet. I just wanted you to riff on what you thought about when he said that.
I like that analogy. I think the only thing he left out was the graham crackers. I think you need to get the milk and the graham crackers.
And the graham cracker. Okay, so the graham cracker.
In the milk. But yeah, that's a real pure example. That, to me, that speaks of purity of heart. And it's funny because people say, well, you love to play blues, but you also say you love to play these beautiful ballads, and which I used to do a lot with Koinonia. And excuse me, the two are so related to me. And the feeling of the blues, although it can be pretty gutsy or guttural, whatever the word is, it's still beautiful. It's a strong feeling. It's a pure feeling. And the same way with ballads or beautiful jazz songs with great chords. Like, I used to love Bill Evans' chords on the piano.
Oh, my God.
They just take you to another place. But to me, it's that pure love of the warmth of the warmth that's at the center of the music is what we live for.
You do you remember if going back to our first interview when you drank turpentine, or you were
all right
ready to ready to check out, and
yes.
did you have any contact with God at those times? Did he come visit you? I mean, when did and I guess maybe you answered this before, but was there a point when that dark cloud of depression kind of at least lifted and wasn't so heavy in your life? I'm just wondering if you had some sort of spiritual transmission with God when you were potentially dying.
Well, I felt like God first came to me in the form of my very loving Christian mother, who showed up. I was in Tulsa when this happened, and she showed up with my dad and was just like an angel to me. Everything she said to me was just so perfect and so loving. I don't think maybe she realized I was in such bad shape emotionally, but when she came and saw me, she did. And it was fantastic. But I would say that the time when the depression really started to leave was when I met Jimmy Hill and started playing at this little mission called the Open Door in Oklahoma City. And, of course, later, as we discussed, Bill Maxwell, Fletch Wiley, Harlan Rogers, all became believers, and we all started a band. We kind of regrouped again under a very different circumstance.
I want to know how Andre Crouch wound up at that Mission Inn. I mean, somebody must have tipped him off that these cats were playing burning spiritual music. I mean, that to me, you know, that's America. That is like the most beautiful story one of the most beautiful stories that I have ever documented on my program. I guess before that, I'm not going to let you get away with this because off air, Maxwell told me that someone, a pretty famous guitar player, people might have heard of him, Eric Clapton, was into the Hawk. They called you the Hawk. I think you were very well admired by a lot of your peers, and I think also you just mentioned Tulsa, so I'm throwing a lot at you here, but were you playing in the black clubs in North Tulsa?
We weren't necessarily playing the black clubs, but we were playing clubs there in Tulsa, and a number of them, and one was rather large called the Factory. And we were playing at another slightly smaller club one night when we knew Eric's entourage. And in fact, Carl Radel, the bass player, is from Tulsa. He came in with the group. So I didn't actually go up and introduce myself to anyone, but I understood they were there. That's all I know.
Well, I know you're a humble cat, but I mean, they were coming to see the Hawk. They were coming to see you. Clapton, I mean, I guess that's the point, is that you really, I think that's probably the most cool thing about, I mean, I'm just so thankful that you're still with us, and God, obviously, the message was, Hadley, you have a lot to give in this life, so you're not leaving. But,
well, I'm thankful too.
Yeah, but I mean, like you were known to Leon Russell, you were known to that group. I mean, that to me, like, I mean, I would have been coming to see the Hawk, I mean, you never got buzzed by the. Did you know at a certain point that you were somebody that was being highly admired by other luminaries, and did you not believe it? And how did you keep your ego? I mean, I think what you said before on the stage, where I remember Leland Sklar, I'm sure you worked with him.
Yeah.
He talked about going on the road with Phil Collins, and it's 30,000 people screaming your name every night. And, Sklar's got the big beard. They're probably yelling about Sklar. And then he's like, I get off the road and I'm cleaning up dog poop in the backyard. I'm just a regular cat. And it's like, it's so, and, it's so easy to be at peace when you are financially secure, when you're healthy, and you can just be humble enough to be like, wow, how lucky am I? How blessed am I to be put on this path? And it's so hard today for younger cats who might have incredible technique or facility, but they don't have the financial security within music to really feel at peace. It is a major crisis, man. It's a major, because so many soulful cats don't have a chance to really open their soul because they are so insecure, and rightfully so, about how they're going to sing for their supper. And it's really an issue. And I'm not saying there's any quick fixes to it. It's just, it's part of my...
I think it's worse now than when I was growing up.
Big time.
And it was pretty bad then. I had some very good friends, talented musicians, one in particular that I encouraged to come to L.A. And he came, and you know what? After about 8 months, he just starved, and he had to go back home. And I felt so bad, because I thought, this guy's as good as anyone out here. But there's a lot of factors. There's the factor of how well do you get along with producers and people in the studio. There's politics. In every aspect of life, there's politics.
I have no doubt. I mean, and that's something I don't... Yeah, it's kind of like, boy, he was impossible to work with. He's not getting a call back. I get that kind of stuff. You know,
Right.
like it doesn't matter how good you are. Although, you know, I mean, it runs the gambit. I mean, did you feel at a certain? I know, like J.J. Cale, like you know, I'm not that tuned up on the Tulsa crew outside of Keltner, but a lot of those
Right.
cats moved back to Tulsa. Like they were not. I mean, I'm not saying that it was the sole reason, but did you feel like? Did you feel like that you fit into Southern California, or how? When did you? It seems like part of me feels like you never really left Oklahoma City.
Well, that's true because I had so many friends out here from Oklahoma and that I had played with and learned how to play with, you know, back there. But I felt like I fit in pretty well. I got fairly accustomed to the studio thing, but the thing I always hated the most was the drive to L.A. and back, the rush hour traffic.
Where were you living?
Orange County. I always lived in Orange
You were
County.
out in OC, so that was a drag. It's probably worse today, but yeah, I mean, it was a drag then, the commute.
Yes, it was a drag, and you know, it caused me to get mild ulcers. I had to start taking medication. That was just the traffic. The sessions, of course, you're making pretty good money, so you want to do a good job. You don't want to make a bunch of mistakes, so you got that pressure as well. But it was mainly the traffic that got to me. I love it. Howard Roberts said that he had a seminar and there was a question period and people asked him, "What's the hardest part about being a studio musician in L.A.?" And he said, "Finding a parking place." And he was right. You know,
He's more. He would be just aghast at the situation today with trying to find parking. It was bad then. It was much worse now. I mean, you know, I mean, did you get to? It's so interesting because, like, we talked about Louis Shelton before, and you know, LC and Parks. But I mean, did you get to play sessions with guys like Tedesco, that original Wrecking Crew guitar players, Barney Kessel or Howard? I mean, did you wind up on? I mean, because like you know, you tended to get put into certain groups. I mean, like you know, Tackett would wind up with Lee Rittenauer, and you know,
of course, Tack. We grew up with him in Oklahoma City.
Dude, I was going to ask you about Joe Davis. Does that name ring a bell?
Oh yeah, Eddie Davis, Joe Davis, yes.
Now, who? Because I mean, that was the whole thing. Tackett was playing with him. They got picked up by this Malaysian singer, and the next thing you know, they're out in Hawaii, and
Was that Taj Mahal? Are you talking about?
No, I'm gonna cue up the story,
Okay.
but the point is that when they wound up on a tour of Hawaii, and Tackett was playing a tune, and who's walking by in like these in these suits. I'm just going to read you this story. It's a little bit long, but I think it's worth it. He said, I moved to Oklahoma City with this amazing musician named Joe Davis. He was a multi-instrumentalist and a teacher at the college. We had a show band. I wouldn't call it a rock and roll band. You'd play Caravan real fast. I was playing drums. He would bring me up and say, play Shadow of Your Smile on the trumpet, and I'll play drums. Everybody had little features, and then we'd back up a floor show of grade C talent like Don Cherry, the singer, 2 Jacks and a Jill, magicians and belly dancers.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Oh man, now you're really bringing it
I'm
out.
fine. I know I'm flooding you, man. They
Jan
would.
Lawson, yeah. I had a crush on her when I was about 14.
No, we're going to get to all of that with you. I just wanted. This is an amazing story. They would come in for a 2-week show at this gig we had at a supper club. It was like Ricky Ricardo going down to the club. I would watch the I Love Lucy show and say, I want to go to the club like Ricky. I had my drums all set up. All I had to do was come in, sit down, and play the show every night. During the 3rd or 4th year of college, this Filipino act named Moses and the Highbrows came through. After their run, he came up to me and said, we need a musical director. I was getting really antsy. I had been taking acid by then. I said, what the hell? Let's go. I gave my notice to Joe and hit the road. The U.S. government was after me to get me drafted, so it was time. We went to Florida, played a couple of weeks, and then we went to Honolulu, and we're playing in an open-air nightclub. Jimmy Webb had just gotten his first money from Up, Up, and Away and My Beautiful Balloon, And I had by the time I get to Phoenix, I had heard these two
I
records.
love
And
Jimmy Webb, one of my great heroes.
I had heard those two records and said, wow, this is some different stuff. By the time I got to Phoenix, it doesn't have a chorus, it's all verses. I'm playing a pre-show thing, and I was playing Ode to Billy Joe because it had just come out and was considered the hippest thing. Jimmy's walking down the street. He hears me playing, and he whispers to his buddy, hey, that's Ode to Billy Joe. The guy said, no, it isn't, because I was playing a solo. Jimmy recognized the change and said, I'll bet you $5 that's Ode to Billy Joe. The guy comes running into the club and asks me, what was the song you just played? I said, Ode to Billy Joe, and he goes running back out of the club. About an hour later, these two dudes come in to the club, and they're all dressed in white. After the show, this guy gets me over to his table and says, there's something I want to talk with you at my hotel across the street about. I said, cool. He said, can you come by after the show? I said, sure. I go back on the bandstand to my piano player and said, hey, dude, this guy's got some great LSD. We're going to score. I go over to the hotel room thinking I'm going to score, and this guy says, hi, I'm Jimmy Webb, the songwriter. I said, holy cow, man, you're Jimmy Webb. He said, I'm putting this group together. I got some friends from high school, and I got this singer. We're all living at this house, so I want you to come to L.A. and hang. Basically, the long and the short of it is Tack had left all his stuff with the band in Honolulu and moved to Jimmy Webb's house, and the rest is history. You know, and that is and so, I mean, that to me was were you playing those shows for belly dancers and flamingo and magicians? And I mean, that was very par for the course for a lot. Yeah.
I had worked with Jesse Davis a number of times. That back then we were just calling him Eddie, but he always was a great blues player. So I immediately was attracted to his music, and he had a band, a humorous kind of name, Joe Banana and his Bunch.
Yes.
And their motto was music with appeal. It was terrible, but the whole thing was kind of a joke because we were playing like fraternity parties, sorority parties, and we were just playing blues. They wanted to dance, but we didn't care. We just played blues shuffles and stuff. And I had a great time. I only did it maybe 5 or 6 times, but it was great.
Do you feel like some of like the ability to, I don't know, improvise on the spot? I mean, I just remember interviewing guys like Mike Mainieri, great vibes player from New York, and he was with Buddy Rich in '61, and they were going on like a U.S. tour of all these Middle Eastern countries that were basically still in the dark. I mean, Afghanistan. I mean, they'd show up. They were taking these prop planes over there, and like they'd show up and like they'd play maybe. I mean, they'd play for a woman who had birds coming out of her shirt, a juggler. Buddy Rich would be tap dancing. They'd play that, and then maybe they'd play a 45-minute set of just jazz standards, and then this crowd of very amazing, simple people. They had no idea what they were taking in, but it was all this diverse, sort of music. Sometimes you had to hit the moves of the dancers.
Right.
Did you feel like that played a role in sort of just being yourself more? You weren't. So many cats today, they grow up and they're playing in their room. They're playing by themselves, and I feel like when you have the opportunity to play and then react to people, hit their moves in all these different settings, it just allows you to be you more. I mean, did you have those opportunities to play? I'm not saying you played, medicine shows or, rabbit foot minstrel shows or things like that, but, did you have opportunities to play in these multi-entertainment sort of settings?
Yes, I've done a few of those. There used to be an amusement park called Spring Lake in Oklahoma City, and they had a outdoor amphitheater, and they had all kind of acts come through. And I got to play bass with the Righteous Brothers. That was a huge thing for me when I was 15.
Wow.
Because they didn't bring their own rhythm section. They brought their drummer and their guitar player, but no bass. And I was recommended, and I said, well, I don't read music, but I know all your songs by heart. And they said, well, let's do it, And so what a thrill that was. And Jan and Dean, believe it or not, came through town, and they had a band they hated. And they asked me to put together a little group to back them up. And that's a long story, but...
Wait, no, I don't care about... I need to hear about... They came in and fired their band, or they had no band?
They had a band, but the band was so bad that they actually stopped the band. They said, quit playing. Jan, he was kind of like the leader of the group. He said, quit playing. I just want to speak the lyrics. That'll be better than you playing the music.
Oh, my, that must have been a train wreck.
Oh, it was terrible.
Oh, my gosh.
And I happened to be at that show, and so I went up and talked to him afterwards. I said, listen, my band knows all your stuff. Because back in Oklahoma City, way back then, I think I was 15 or 14, we were doing all the surf stuff, Beach Boys stuff. And I said, my band already knows your stuff. We can come right in. And we had a rehearsal at their hotel, and they said, it sounds good to us, let's do it. Well, the other band found out that none of us were members of the musicians union. So while we were playing our warm-up set, they had the Pinkerton police come out, and understand all my school buddies are there. Right?
Right.
And they come out and pull us off like a bunch of criminals off the stage.
What were you being accused of?
Not being a member of the union and playing at Spring Lake.
Okay, so, and I guess Jan and Dean, as the leaders, couldn't really do anything about that? Or, I mean,
They couldn't do anything because this was the authority of the whole park, the Pinkerton police.
Sure.
They were the authority. So I don't know what happened afterwards. I assume they got their old band back out there to see what they could do, but that was a memory.
Wait, hold on. So actually, were you arrested?
No, not technically arrested. I think they thought we were too young to really arrest us, but we were just escorted out of the park for breaking their law.
Dude, Hadley Hockensmith causing ruckuses. Dude, I love, that is it's kind of a so you actually never had a chance to play with them, is that, I guess, right?
No, only rehearse with them, and I thought it sounded really good.
I bet it did.
Yeah. And, while we're telling stories, I want to share one other thing.
Please.
Bill might like for me to share this. We were playing at a club called the Oriental Club in Lawton, Oklahoma. There's an Air Force base there, so a lot of people came from the Air Force to check out the bands. And the club owner had an inside contact with the police. And I was 14 years old at the time, playing with an organ trio called the Voodoo Men. And we got a heads up that the Vice Squad was coming to raid the club because they'd heard a lot of underage people were getting into the club. So we thought, what are we going to do? We just got 3 pieces. If I can't be up there playing guitar, it's just going to be like a naked band. And so we figured out a way. The ceiling had these little asbestos tiles you could push out.
Sure.
So we pushed a few of them out and put a piece of plywood up there so I could lie flat in the dark. This is in the summer. It's probably 115 degrees up there. And I played the first 2 sets, with my head down to the plywood so I could hear the band, playing guitar up there in the dark.
Wait a minute. You were parallel to you were not standing up. You were laying down?
No, I was lying down. Yeah, I don't even know there was room to stand up.
This is hysterical. Just so you could avoid any wrath from Vice Squad. Is that it?
That's right. And they came in. But they never noticed anything was wrong. Even there was a big guitar cord coming down from the ceiling. We made it through the first 2 sets, and then I could come down and cool off.
And so that is epic. That is beyond epic, man. So, I mean, I got one more voice for you, Hadley. I want to put this in.
Yeah.
I think it's going to start with me asking a question, but just wait, and then he'll answer.
Okay.
of your mentors, you got a break and overcame it and got to be, put you on the path that you're on today?
Well, I understand that we can't do anything alone. We need each other, and we borrowed from each other. We got each other gigs, and we pointed to gigs, and we pointed to the musicianship that other was presenting. But I didn't know which direction my potential success was going to come. It was John Hammond that made the difference. He heard me at a R&B club. I was playing behind Go Go Girl. And James Brown used to come down from the Apollo because it was right down the street. And he would sit in with us many nights. And he asked me to join his organization. He wanted me to open his show. That's what he said.
Oh, wow.
And my crazy answer was, and I remember I was talking to one of the greatest performers of his time. I told Mr. Brown, I said, well, Mr. Brown, we're jazz musicians, Can you imagine me saying that to a man who was rich and was offering us the opportunity of a lifetime to open his show? Wow. And I said that to him. Well, I paid the price. It took me 11 years to get in a position where I was had some importance in my career. But John Hammond said it back then. He said, I perceive that you do a lot of things. You're very versatile and you do them all well. He said, but if you are known as a jazz musician first, your career will have longevity. And that turned out to be the real truth of the matter.
Hadley, you want to take a stab at who that is?
Oh, my gosh. When I first heard the voice, it sounded like a black singer that...
he was originally a doo-wop singer, turned into a world-renowned guitar player. That was my interview with George Benson.
Oh my gosh, that was George Benson.
And George, I mean, this is crazy, Hadley, because he was a doo-wopper and younger. I mean, if you think about Pittsburgh, Billy Strayhorn, Ahmad Jamal, Booker Irvin, Dodo Momoros, I mean, Ray Brown, I mean, the most ridiculous cats came out of Pittsburgh, and George was younger than them, and they used to, they would not, I'm not even those guys per se, but he was like, they didn't want him to play the guitar. He was a singer. They didn't let him play with them a lot. He was playing behind go-go dancers. James Brown was offering him gigs. And, he was fixated. I always find it interesting, too. When you do find that niche between being an artist and then having massive commercial success, what he was basically saying was Brown approached him in 65, and I guess Breezin' came out in 76, and the rest is kind of history. But, the question I had asked him was, can you talk about a time in your life when you faced adversity and how you overcame it and how you made it strong, how it made you stronger? And he was talking about those early years playing with, Dr. Lonnie Smith and Lou Donaldson, playing in these organ quartets.
And he played with Jack McDuff.
I'm sorry, McDuff. McDuff was the cat. Yeah. And he just said, guys were pointing out gigs to other people. They were helping other people find gigs. Now, it was a matter of the work going around, but to me, it is the essence of leadership, especially in this time. I know that, you're not, burning in the studios the way you once were. I just wanted you to talk about, outside of even Sunlight and those cats, just the idea of camaraderie and helping, and that it's up to everyone coming out of coronavirus. If we really want live, not just live music, but a live touring circuit with the ability for, cats to not just tour, but to be paid for their work. I mean, Dizzy, those guys used to get furious when people would say, "Oh, you're playing music, man." They're like, "We're not playing, man. We're not playing anything. This is work." And we've gotten so far away from that. But yeah. I do believe that it comes down to, as much power as they have, is that the musicians especially looking out for each other. And I kind of wanted you to just talk about the qualities of leadership that whether you're the biggest star like a Neil Diamond or, just an up and coming creative, how to stay together as a group and how to lead so that we can actually revitalize live music in our culture and as a profession.
Right. Well, the first thing you mentioned, having a group, that's so important.
You're darn right. Bands are hard to come by these days.
Yeah, you see so many solo artists now.
You're right. It's
that's everyone's dream now, is to be a solo artist. The thing that I loved was being a part of something that was bigger than myself. And, that's what playing in a band is all about, especially playing in a big band like, say, Neil Diamond's band, where everything is so arranged and we each play our part. There's something very satisfying about being a part of something that's really big like that. And I don't think you're ever going to get that thrill just playing solo.
Right. Have you, have you played in your church? What kind of gigs have you played since coronavirus? Do you play anymore or do you miss playing at all?
I still play live. There's a band of people that I grew up with. I used to go to church with them all. It's not necessarily a Christian band. They just do pop music. But it's very fun to play with that group. They're called Point Made, and really nice people and a good group. They all sing. And I happen to play bass in this group, although I have dabbled on guitar as well. But man, I love playing the bass. I get to go to town. Say it's just a 4-piece band, so there's a lot of room to wail on the bass.
Has live music ever really stopped in Oklahoma City? Because I know that in certain states, live music is, at least in some form, still really happening.
Well, I think it varies from city to city. I always used to think I'd love to live in Austin because there's so many places to play, but I understand even that has changed somewhat.
It has. I know that. Yeah. No. You know what? This is the Hadley. We're going to have to do set 3 because there's other things we need. As long as you're having fun. I don't want to.
I am having fun. I'm just kind of losing my voice, but that's okay. I'll be in better shape for the next one.
Yeah. No. I wanted to ask you this. That was the other thing about Omar in my interview with him. On those Muir, White Horse, and those records. There was not a litmus test if you were Christian or not to play on those records. And but there did come a point in the studio when that did became an inside job. Like you had to be of Christian faith. Isn't that right?
Very seldom did I see that. Almost never did I see that.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. I thought that over time, I'm talking like early 80s at that point, it became very exclusive. Where before you might see any types of cats playing on records that might be considered contemporary Christian records, but then after a while it was, actually you have to be Christian as well. But you're saying no.
Well, maybe you're referring to something like the Maranatha Praise records, which were very popular, and I did play on a lot of those. I would say in that instance, they would prefer you be a believer, but they didn't feel like the session was going to be defiled if you weren't. But other than that, it just wasn't a big deal. The album that I co-produced with Bruce Hibbard, which had a lot of airplay and success, is called Never Turning Back.
Yes.
We used Dean Parks, who never claimed to be a believer. We used Denny Belfield on bass on some songs. He didn't claim to be a believer. It never was that way. We felt like, as an example, we would usually pray, ask the Lord to bless the recordings, before we start.
Sure.
And we would very nicely ask the other people there who maybe weren't Christians, if they would join us, and if they didn't feel comfortable, that's fine. And we would just have a short prayer to kind of kick the thing off. But it was never, we never wanted anyone to feel excluded.
No, I mean, dude, I wish, honestly, if everybody led their spiritual life the way you and Maxwell did, I just feel like we'd be in such a more beautiful place in society, man. I can't, I'm not saying you're perfect. I'm just saying I hear a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of exclusionary stuff going on at a certain level. And like you said, even the music is a direct reflection of the angst and the insecurity within spirituality, the fact that it's louder, the fact that sometimes it can overpower whatever vocals there are, and then ultimately what are the messages coming out of the music. It's kind of muddled up, and that's one reason I really like to, I always feel very purified after this stuff. It's and it gives me a lot of hope in humanity, man. I just we just cooked through another 66 minutes here. So, yeah, I think we got at least one more installment to do. So I want you to rest your voice. And if you have any copies of that Sunlight, I'd love to get my hands on that.
I got that, and that will be coming to you soon. In case you haven't, please send me your address.
Okay, I'll do it again. I will. Hadley, much love to you, man. Have a beautiful day, and I'll reach out to you next week.
Great talking to you, Jake.
Always, Hadley. Be good.
Bless you.
Later.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Just another beautiful hang with a beautiful cat. Hadley Hockensmith. He was preceded by Brent Rademacher. A couple of real spiritual musicians, and we can only hope moving forward they'll carry the day. That's it for the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll see you later.